The afternoon sun blazed mercilessly over the Olympic Stadium as hundreds of cameras clicked and whirred, capturing what should have been a moment of triumph. Instead, they documented something far more unsettling. A young black man in pristine Team USA track gear stood frozen at the security checkpoint. His hands raised slightly as a stern-faced security officer blocked his path with an outstretched arm. "I said step back." Officer Karen Mitchell's voice cut through the humid air like a blade. Her uniform was crisp, her badge gleaming, but her eyes held the cold certainty of someone who had already made up her mind. "This is a restricted area. You don't belong here." Michael Washington felt the familiar knot in his stomach tighten. 26 years old, at the peak of his athletic career. And here he was, again being judged not by his accomplishments, but by the color of his skin. The weight of his credentials bag seemed heavier on his shoulder as he took a measured breath, fighting to keep his voice steady. "Ma'am, I'm Michael Washington. I'm competing in the 400-meter dash. And I'm scheduled to—" "I don't care what you think you're scheduled to do." Karen's interruption was sharp, dismissive. "I've been working Olympic security for 8 years, and I know a troublemaker when I see one. You're not getting past this checkpoint without proper authorization." The irony wasn't lost on Michael. 3 hours from now, he would be leading the entire United States delegation into this very stadium, carrying the stars and stripes as the flag bearer for the opening ceremony. The honor had been bestowed upon him just 2 weeks ago, recognizing not only his athletic achievements, but his work with underprivileged youth in Detroit. Now, he couldn't even get through the front door. Behind him, a small crowd had begun to gather. Other athletes, coaches, media personnel, all witnessing this humiliating spectacle. Michael could feel their eyes on him, could hear the whispered conversations and the telltale sound of phone cameras recording. This was exactly the kind of situation his agent had warned him about, the kind that could overshadow years of hard work in a matter of minutes. "Look, I have my credentials right here." Michael slowly reached into his bag, moving deliberately to avoid any sudden motions that might escalate the situation. "My name is on the competition roster. I can show you." "Don't you dare reach into that bag." Karen's hand moved instinctively toward her radio. "I'm calling for backup. We have a suspicious individual attempting to breach Olympic security." The word suspicious hung in the air like smoke from a fire. Michael felt the heat rise in his cheeks, a mixture of anger and humiliation that he'd experienced too many times before. But this time was different. This time, the entire world was watching. Dr. Sarah Chen, Team USA's sports psychologist, had been making her way to the athletes' lounge when she noticed the commotion. She quickened her pace, her heart sinking as she recognized Michael's distinctive posture, the way he held himself when trying to remain calm under pressure. She'd worked with him for 2 years, helping him manage the anxiety that came with being one of the few black athletes in his event at the international level. "Officer, there seems to be some misunderstanding." Dr. Chen's voice was measured, professional. "This is Michael Washington. He's one of our premier athletes. And you are—" Karen didn't even look at Dr. Chen, keeping her focus locked on Michael, as if he might bolt at any moment. "Dr. Sarah Chen, Team USA Sports Psychology. Michael is not only competing in track and field, he's also our flag bearer for tonight's opening ceremony." Karen's laugh was short and bitter. "Right. And I'm the Queen of England. Look, lady, I don't know what kind of scam you two are running, but it's not going to work on me. Real Olympic athletes don't just show up without proper escort and documentation." The crowd was growing larger now. Michael could see familiar faces, teammates, coaches, journalists he'd spoken with over the past few days. Marcus Rodriguez, his training partner and closest friend on the team, pushed through the gathering crowd. Marcus had grown up in the same Detroit neighborhood as Michael, and he knew exactly what his friend was experiencing. "What the hell is going on here?" Marcus's voice carried the edge of barely controlled anger. "Mike, you okay?" "Just a misunderstanding," Michael replied. Though his jaw was clenched tight, he'd learned long ago that showing anger in these situations only made things worse. "Misunderstanding my ass." Marcus turned to Karen, his eyes flashing. "This man is one of the fastest humans on the planet. He's representing our country in 3 days, and he's carrying our flag tonight. What exactly is suspicious about that?" Karen's radio crackled to life, and she lifted it to her mouth without breaking eye contact with Michael. "This is Mitchell at Gate 7. I need additional units for a potential security breach. Individual refusing to comply with security protocols." The static-filled response came back immediately. "Copy that. Mitchell, units en route." Michael felt his world tilting slightly off its axis. This was spiraling out of control fast. In his mind, he could see the headlines: "Olympic flag bearer detained for security breach." His mother would see it on the news. His former coach, who'd worked 3 jobs to pay for Michael's training when he was young, would watch his protege being treated like a criminal on national television. Emma Richardson, a sports journalist from ESPN, had been covering the Olympics for 15 years. She'd interviewed Michael several times over the past week, and she recognized immediately what was happening. This wasn't just a security mix-up. This was racial profiling in broad daylight, captured by dozens of cameras. She began live tweeting the incident, her fingers flying across her phone screen. "Officer Mitchell, isn't it?" Emma approached with her press credentials clearly visible. "Emma Richardson, ESPN. Can you explain why you're detaining Team USA's flag bearer?" "I'm not detaining anyone. I'm following security protocols for an unidentified individual attempting to access restricted areas." "Unidentified?" Emma's voice rose slightly. "This is Michael Washington. He's been featured in Olympic promotional materials for weeks. His face is literally on posters inside the stadium." For the first time, Karen hesitated. A flicker of uncertainty crossed her face, but she quickly pushed it away. She'd come too far to back down now, and admitting she was wrong would mean acknowledging that she'd made assumptions based on race rather than facts. "Anyone can claim to be anyone. I don't care if he says he's the Pope. Without proper documentation and escort, nobody gets through this checkpoint." Michael slowly pulled out his official Olympic credentials, the lanyard still around his neck. The plastic card clearly displayed his photo, name, event, and status as flag bearer. He held it up so Karen could see it clearly, his hand remarkably steady despite the rage building inside him. "Here's my documentation. Would you like to examine it?" Karen glanced at the credentials, but her expression didn't change. "These could be fake. I've seen some pretty sophisticated counterfeits in my time." The absurdity of the situation was becoming apparent to everyone, except Karen herself. Here was an elite athlete, surrounded by team officials and media who clearly knew him, holding legitimate credentials, being treated like a common criminal. The incident was rapidly becoming a social media sensation, with videos and photos spreading across platforms at viral speed. 2 additional security officers arrived, their expressions immediately shifting from alert readiness to confusion as they took in the scene. Officer Bradley Thompson, a 15-year veteran of Olympic security, recognized Michael immediately from the promotional materials he'd reviewed that morning. "Karen, what's the situation here? Potential trespasser, claims to be an Olympic athlete, but I'm not buying it." Officer Thompson looked from Karen to Michael, then at the crowd of officials and media surrounding them. His experience told him something was very wrong with this picture, but protocol demanded he support his colleague's assessment until proven otherwise. "Sir, if you could just step aside while we verify your credentials." "No." Michael's voice was quiet but firm. I've shown my credentials. I've been identified by multiple team officials. I have every right to be here. And I'm not moving until someone with actual authority resolves this situation. The tension was palpable now. Athletes from various countries had stopped to watch the confrontation, many of them pulling out phones to record. This was no longer just about one athlete's right to enter the stadium. It had become a symbol of something much larger and more troubling. Coach Williams, Team USA's head track and field coach, came striding through the crowd with the determination of a man who dealt with bureaucratic nonsense his entire career. At 62, he'd coached 4 Olympic teams and had seen every variety of administrative confusion imaginable. But this was different. This was personal. "What in God's name is happening here?" His voice boomed across the checkpoint area. "Michael, you're supposed to be in final preparations for the ceremony." "Coach, they won't let me through. Officer Mitchell here thinks I'm some kind of trespasser." Coach Williams had known Michael since he was 17 years old, a skinny kid from Detroit with more heart than natural talent. He'd watched him transform into one of the world's premier sprinters through sheer determination and countless hours of training. The idea that anyone could look at this young man and see a threat rather than an inspiration made his blood boil. "Officer Mitchell, I am Coach Robert Williams, head of Team USA Track and Field. This young man is not only one of our elite competitors, he's been selected to carry the American flag at tonight's opening ceremony. By what authority are you preventing him from accessing the stadium?" Karen's position was becoming increasingly untenable, but pride and stubbornness kept her from backing down. She'd made her decision based on her first impression, and now she was trapped by it. To admit error would be to acknowledge the implicit bias that had colored her judgment from the moment she saw Michael approaching. "I don't care who says they know him. Security protocols exist for a reason. And I'm not going to compromise Olympic safety because someone has a sob story about being an athlete." The word sob story cut through the air like a slap. Michael felt something inside him shift, a line being crossed that couldn't be uncrossed. This wasn't just about security anymore. This was about dignity, respect, and the right to exist in spaces without having to constantly prove his worth. A sob story. Michael's voice was dangerously quiet. "Is that what you think this is, a sob story, Dr.?" Chen stepped closer to Michael, recognizing the signs of an athlete pushed beyond his breaking point. She'd worked with enough competitors to know when someone was about to explode, and she could see that Michael was holding on to his composure by the thinnest of threads. "Michael, don't let her bait you. Stay focused on what's important." But Michael was beyond being managed. Years of similar encounters, of having to prove himself over and over again, of being viewed with suspicion in places where he belonged, had reached a crescendo in this moment. His voice rose, carrying across the checkpoint area and reaching the growing crowd of onlookers. "You want to know what's important. What's important is that in 3 hours, I'm supposed to lead the greatest athletes in the world into that stadium. What's important is that hundreds of kids in Detroit are going to watch me carry that flag and believe that they can achieve anything. What's important is that I've spent 12 years of my life preparing for this moment, and you're trying to take it away from me because you looked at me and decided I didn't belong here." The crowd had grown silent, hanging on every word. Michael's passion was raw, unfiltered, and absolutely compelling. This wasn't just about athletic achievement. This was about representation, about breaking barriers, about proving that excellence comes in all colors. "You think I don't belong here? Let me tell you something about belonging. I belong here because I ran 400 meters in 43.21 seconds at the World Championships. I belong here because I've dedicated my life to representing this country with honor and dignity. I belong here because the United States Olympic Committee chose me to carry our flag. Not because of what I look like, but because of what I've accomplished." Officer Thompson was growing increasingly uncomfortable with the situation. He'd reviewed the athlete files that morning, and Michael Washington's photo and accomplishments were prominently featured. Karen's insistence on treating him as a security threat was not only wrong, it was becoming an international incident. Inside the stadium, Olympic officials were becoming aware of the situation through social media reports and text messages from concerned staff members. The opening ceremony director, Patricia Hendricks, was in the middle of final technical rehearsals when her assistant approached with urgent news. "Patricia, we have a problem. Michael Washington is being detained at Gate 7. Something about security protocols." "Detained? What do you mean, detained?" "He's supposed to be here for final flag-bearer preparations." Patricia had worked on Olympic ceremonies for 20 years, and she knew that logistics could be complicated. But this was different. Michael Washington wasn't just any athlete. He was the face of the American team for tonight's ceremony. His detention would be a PR nightmare if it wasn't resolved immediately. She grabbed her radio and contacted the head of Olympic security. Within minutes, the situation was escalating through proper channels. But meanwhile, at Gate 7, the confrontation was reaching its boiling point. Karen's radio crackled again, but this time, the voice on the other end carried the authority of someone much higher in the command structure. "Mitchell, this is Director Hayes. What's your current status at Gate 7? For the first time. Karen's confidence wavered slightly. Director Hayes was her ultimate supervisor, and his tone suggested this was not a routine check-in. "Sir, I have a potential security breach. Individual claiming to be an Olympic athlete, but I'm not satisfied with his documentation. Mitchell, I need you to stand down immediately. Allow the individual to proceed to the athlete's entrance." "Sir, I really think we should verify." "That's a direct order. Officer Mitchell, stand down now." The color drained from Karen's face as she realized the implications of her supervisor's intervention. This wasn't just any random individual. This was someone important enough to warrant direct intervention from the highest levels of Olympic security. But instead of stepping aside gracefully, Karen doubled down on her position. Pride, embarrassment, and the sudden realization that she might have made a serious error combined to create a perfect storm of poor judgment. "With all due respect, sir, I'm the officer on the ground here. I can see what you can't see. And I'm telling you, this individual poses a security risk." The gasps from the crowd were audible. Officer Thompson looked at his colleague with shock and growing alarm. Disobeying a direct order from the security director was career suicide, and he wanted no part of whatever Karen was doing. "Karen, you need to step back and let Mr. Washington through. Don't you dare take his side. Bradley, we swore an oath to protect this venue, and that's exactly what I'm doing." The situation had moved beyond the realm of simple misunderstanding into something far more serious. Karen's refusal to follow direct orders, combined with her obvious bias against Michael, was creating a crisis that would have ramifications far beyond this single checkpoint. Michael stood in the middle of it all, watching his Olympic dream potentially crumble before his eyes. The opening ceremony was less than 3 hours away, and instead of preparing mentally and physically for the most important moment of his athletic career, he was trapped in a confrontation that seemed to have no end. Marcus Rodriguez had been silent for several minutes, but his anger was building to dangerous levels. He'd grown up with Michael, had seen him face discrimination throughout his career, and watching his best friend being humiliated on the world stage was more than he could bear. "You know what this is really about, don't you?" Marcus stepped forward, his voice carrying the weight of years of accumulated frustration. "This isn't about security. This isn't about protocols. This is about the fact that you looked at my friend and decided he was a threat because he's a young black man." "How dare you accuse me of racism?" Karen's voice rose to nearly a shout. "I treat everyone equally regardless of their race." Do you because I'm standing right here with the same credentials, wearing the same Team USA gear, and you haven't asked to see my documentation once. Care to explain that? The observation hit like a thunderclap. Marcus was absolutely right. He'd been part of the crowd for over 20 minutes, clearly identified as an athlete, and Karen hadn't given him a second glance. The differential treatment was stark and undeniable. Dr. Chen recognized that the situation was spiraling toward a confrontation that could have serious consequences for everyone involved. As a sports psychologist, she understood the dynamics of conflict escalation, and she could see that both sides were becoming entrenched in positions that would be difficult to abandon. Officer Mitchell, I understand you're doing your job, but this situation is becoming counterproductive for everyone. Mr. Washington has been positively identified by multiple team officials. His credentials have been presented and verified, and your own supervisor has ordered you to allow him to proceed. What exactly would it take for you to feel comfortable letting him pass? It was a reasonable question, designed to give Karen a face-saving way out of the confrontation. But reason had long since left the building, replaced by stubbornness and the sunk cost fallacy of having invested too much in a losing position to back down now. What it would take is for him to admit that he was in the wrong and apologize for causing this disruption. The demand was so outrageous that several people in the crowd audibly gasped. Michael, who had maintained his composure despite extraordinary provocation, felt something inside him finally snap. Apologize. You want me to apologize for trying to enter a building where I have every right to be. You want me to apologize for existing in a space where you don't think I belong. You want me to apologize for having the audacity to be black and successful at the same time. Michael's voice carried across the checkpoint area and beyond, reaching other athletes, officials, and media who had gathered to witness this extraordinary confrontation. His words weren't just about this moment. They were about every moment like this. Every time he'd been made to feel like an intruder in his own success. I will not apologize for working harder than anyone else to get here. I will not apologize for representing my country with pride and dignity. And I will not apologize for refusing to be treated like a criminal when I've done nothing wrong except exist in your presence. The power of his words silenced even Karen momentarily. This wasn't just an athlete defending his right to compete. This was a young man defending his fundamental dignity as a human being. The crowd around them had grown to nearly 100 people, and many were openly recording the confrontation. Suddenly, the public address system crackled to life throughout the Olympic complex. Patricia Hendricks, the ceremony director, had made the decision to intervene directly. Her voice echoed across the stadium grounds and surrounding areas, reaching thousands of athletes, officials, and staff. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Patricia Hendricks, Director of Olympic Ceremonies. I want to take this opportunity to remind everyone that tonight's opening ceremony will be led by Team USA flag bearer Michael Washington, one of our most accomplished and inspiring athletes. Mr. Washington's achievements on and off the track embody the Olympic spirit of excellence, friendship, and respect. We look forward to his leadership as he guides our delegation into the stadium this evening. The announcement was like a bomb detonating in the middle of the confrontation. Every person at Gate 7 athletes, officials, media, and security personnel turned to look at Michael with new understanding. The man Karen had been treating as a potential terrorist was not just an Olympic athlete, he was the flag bearer, the highest honor that could be bestowed upon a member of the delegation. Karen's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, realization, and finally, the dawning horror of understanding exactly how badly she had misjudged the situation. The man she'd been humiliating for the past hour wasn't just any athlete. He was arguably the most important American athlete at these Olympics, at least ceremonially. The crowd's reaction was immediate and powerful. Applause began slowly, then built to a crescendo as more people joined in. Athletes from various countries began chanting Michael's name, creating a spontaneous celebration that transformed the ugly confrontation into something resembling a victory rally. Washington, Washington, Washington. The chant echoed off the stadium walls, audible even inside the venue where final preparations were taking place. Athletes who had never met Michael personally joined in, recognizing that they were witnessing something significant, a moment when sports transcended competition to become something more meaningful. Officer Thompson immediately stepped aside, gesturing for Michael to proceed through the checkpoint. His expression was a mixture of embarrassment and relief that the situation was finally resolving. He'd been increasingly uncomfortable with Karen's handling of the incident, and the ceremony director's announcement confirmed his worst fears about how badly they'd mismanaged the situation. "Mr. Washington, please proceed. And sir, I apologize for this delay." Michael nodded at Thompson, recognizing that the officer had been caught in an impossible situation created by his colleague's poor judgment. He gathered his bag and began walking toward the checkpoint. But Karen stepped back into his path one final time. "This isn't over. I'm filing a report about your uncooperative behavior and the disruption you caused." The threat was empty, and everyone knew it, including Karen herself. But she'd invested too much in her position to abandon it gracefully, even in the face of overwhelming evidence that she was wrong. It was a last-ditch attempt to salvage some authority from a situation that had spiraled completely out of her control. Michael stopped and turned back to face her. When he spoke, his voice was calm, but carried the weight of absolute moral authority. "You're absolutely right. This isn't over. Because every kid who sees this video is going to learn something important today. They're going to learn that standing up for what's right isn't always easy, but it's always necessary. They're going to learn that dignity isn't something that can be taken away from you. It's something you choose to maintain, even when others try to strip it away. And most importantly, they're going to learn that their dreams are valid, regardless of what anyone else thinks about their right to pursue them." With that, Michael walked through the checkpoint and into the stadium, followed by thunderous applause from the crowd that had witnessed his ordeal. But the story wasn't over. It was just beginning to ripple outward in ways that would affect everyone involved. Within hours, video footage of the confrontation had spread across every major social media platform. "Flag Bearer Stand" became a trending hashtag worldwide, with athletes, celebrities, and ordinary citizens sharing their own stories of discrimination and standing up for justice. Michael's dignified response to provocation became a masterclass in grace under pressure. Inside the stadium, Michael went through his final preparations for the opening ceremony with remarkable composure. His teammates rallied around him, offering support and expressing their outrage at his treatment. But Michael's focus remained fixed on the task ahead, representing his country and his fellow athletes with the dignity and pride they deserved. As the sun set over the Olympic Stadium, thousands of spectators filled the seats for the opening ceremony. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation, but those who had followed the day's events on social media brought an extra level of emotional investment to Michael's appearance as flag bearer. When the American delegation appeared at the entrance to the stadium, led by Michael carrying the stars and stripes, the crowd erupted in a roar that seemed to shake the very foundations of the building. It wasn't just appreciation for an athletic achievement. It was recognition of a moment when sports had transcended competition to become a statement about human dignity and equality. Michael walked into that stadium carrying more than just a flag. He carried the hopes and dreams of everyone who had ever been told they didn't belong somewhere they had every right to be. His stride was confident, his head held high, and his smile genuine, as he waved to the crowd that had embraced him as a symbol of perseverance and grace. Meanwhile, Karen Mitchell found herself in the security office, facing a very different kind of reckoning. Director Hayes had called an emergency meeting to discuss the incident, and Karen's future with Olympic security was very much in doubt. Officer Mitchell, I've reviewed the incident reports and watched the video footage that's circulating online. Your handling of the situation was not only inappropriate, it was a direct violation of our protocols and values. Sir, I was just following security procedures. I couldn't have known. You couldn't have known because you refused to look at his credentials properly. You couldn't have known because you ignored the identification provided by multiple team officials. Most importantly, you couldn't have known because you made assumptions based on appearance rather than facts. The conversation continued for nearly an hour, but the outcome was never in doubt. Karen's actions had created an international incident that reflected poorly on Olympic security, the host country, and the values of the Olympic movement itself. Her termination was effective immediately, but the consequences extended beyond Karen's career. The incident sparked a broader conversation about security protocols, implicit bias, and the treatment of athletes of color at international sporting events. Olympic officials announced a comprehensive review of security procedures and mandatory bias training for all personnel. 3 days later, Michael Washington stepped into the blocks for his qualifying heat in the 400-meter dash. The crowd's support was overwhelming, with spectators from multiple countries cheering for the athlete who had become a symbol of dignity under pressure. The extra motivation proved powerful. Michael ran a personal best time that put him at the top of the qualifying times. In the finals, Michael channeled all of his emotions, the anger, the frustration, the pride, and the determination into the race of his life. He crossed the finish line in 43.03 seconds, setting a new Olympic record and winning gold in spectacular fashion. As he stood on the podium, listening to the national anthem and watching the American flag rise to the top of the pole, he thought about all the young people who were watching and dreaming their own dreams. After the Olympics, Michael's story continued to resonate around the world. He established a foundation focused on providing opportunities for underprivileged youth, using his platform to advocate for equality and justice in sports and society. The incident at Gate 7, which could have been a humiliating footnote to his career, instead became the catalyst for meaningful change. Speaking at a press conference months later, Michael reflected on the experience with characteristic thoughtfulness. That day at the checkpoint was one of the hardest moments of my life, but it was also one of the most important. It reminded me that excellence isn't just about what you achieve. It's about how you handle yourself when someone tries to diminish your achievements. It's about maintaining your dignity when others question your right to be somewhere you've earned the right to be. The story of Michael Washington and Officer Karen Mitchell became a case study in business schools, police academies, and diversity training programs around the world. It demonstrated how quickly unconscious bias can escalate into public relations disasters, and how individual choices can have far-reaching consequences. Karen Mitchell, for her part, faced not just professional consequences, but personal ones as well. The video of her confrontation with Michael went viral, making her a symbol of prejudice and abuse of authority. She struggled to find employment in security or law enforcement, and eventually moved to another state to escape the notoriety. Years later, in a rare interview, Karen expressed regret for her actions. "I let my assumptions override my training and my common sense. I turned what should have been a routine security check into an international incident because I couldn't see past my own biases. I can't undo the damage I caused, but I hope others can learn from my mistakes." The Olympic Games that year were remembered for many outstanding athletic performances. But perhaps none more significant than the image of Michael Washington carrying the American flag into the opening ceremony. It became an iconic photograph, reproduced in textbooks, and displayed in museums as a symbol of perseverance, dignity, and the ongoing struggle for equality. Michael's story demonstrated that sometimes the most important victories happen away from the competition venue. His grace under pressure, his refusal to be diminished by prejudice, and his ability to transform a negative experience into positive change showed that true champions are defined not just by their athletic achievements, but by their character. The incident also highlighted the power of solidarity in the face of injustice. The athletes, coaches, and officials who stood with Michael at Gate 7 showed that the Olympic spirit of unity and respect isn't just a slogan, it's a principle worth defending when it's under attack. As Michael continued his career after the Olympics, he carried with him the knowledge that his success represented more than personal achievement. Every race he ran, every record he set, every young person he inspired carried forward the message that excellence and dignity go hand in hand. The checkpoint at Gate 7 was eventually renamed the Michael Washington Entrance, in honor of the athlete who transformed a moment of discrimination into a teaching moment for the world. The plaque beside the entrance reads, "Excellence is not just about crossing the finish line first, it's about how you carry yourself on the journey." Today, Michael Washington's story continues to inspire athletes and non-athletes alike. It serves as a reminder that in the face of prejudice and discrimination, the most powerful response is not anger or violence, but dignity, persistence, and the unwavering belief in one's own worth. His legacy extends far beyond his Olympic gold medal to encompass the broader struggle for equality and justice in sports and society. The confrontation that began with one officer's biased assumptions ended with a worldwide conversation about respect, dignity, and the true meaning of athletic excellence. It proved that sometimes the most important races are not run on tracks, but in the corridors of public opinion and the court of human conscience. And, in that race, Michael Washington was unquestionably the champion.